the two kisses and the diverse ironic meanings. Luke chapter 7, verses 44 onwards. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Luke chapter 22, verses 47 onwards. While he was still speaking, a crowd came up, and the man who was called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him. But Jesus asked him, "Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" When Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, "Lord, should we strike with our swords?" And one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him, "Am I leading a rebellion that you have come with swords and clubs? Every day I was with you in the temple courts, and you did not lay a hand on me. But this is your hour when darkness reigns." So we see two different people kissing Jesus in two different circumstances, on two different occasions, with two different, perhaps opposite purposes. Both are coming from darkness, in a sense, because that woman was a sinful woman who kissed Jesus' feet. And Judas, as the narrative goes in Luke 22, has come from the dark place. He is led by the Satan. And Jesus says, after his act is completed, that this is your hour when darkness reigns. So here we see a profound mystery. One person who is a disciple of Jesus, a follower of Jesus, a close aid of Jesus, a confidant of Jesus, treasurer of Jesus' ministry, who handles all the money that comes to Jesus. He is turning out to be the son of the devil, a Satan in disguise. And on the other hand, we have this woman who lived all her life in sin. She did only sin, according to the certain Pharisee who was very certain about other people's sin, in whose house Jesus was dining. So this is what happened there. When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, Jesus went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house. So she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. Two people owed money to a certain money lender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. And we know the rest of the story, which I read for you already. So here, Jesus is using a story that relates to money. There was a money lender, and that money lender gave loans. And he gave loans to many people. There were two people, one got 500 denarii and the other got 50 denarii. Maybe the 500 guy had more property, so maybe he was doing a bigger business, we don't know. Neither of them had the money to repay him. So he forgave the debts of both. The moneylender was so nice that he forgave the debts of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Now, we know there are big businessmen in India today who love the banks more than small people, because the small people like farmers, they are coerced to pay their full amount, and many of them commit suicide because if they die, then their families would get some compensation which they can use for their livelihood. But if they continue to live, they will have to pay back the loans that they have taken from the banks. And the banks use sometimes very stringent measures to harass these people because they are poor and they cannot retaliate, they cannot fight back. So for these kind of people, banks are not so good. I mean, even if they forgive, like even if some great Modi ji kind of leader comes and says that we are forgiving many people's loans, of course there is a reason to be happy, but they would be happy in a moderate way. But when it comes to big guys, like 2,000 crores, 2,500 crores, crores and crores of rupees are forgiven by the banks. And they just write these things off finally because they cannot recover anything from these people. They are bankrupt, as they say, and they cannot take anything, though these people are living in luxury. And finally, those debts are forgiven completely. And once these debts are forgiven completely, these people, they love the banks. They love the banks. They love the government. They love this establishment very much. So it is a similar scenario here. Jesus is saying that there are two kinds of people here. And one person had a bigger loan forgiven. Who do you think would love more? Simon had no doubt. He knew that the person who had a bigger loan would be feeling more relief, and therefore that would be the person who would love the forgiver more. Now, in those times, Pharisees considered themselves as people who are set apart to work for God, to wait for God. And sometimes they were the moral police of that area. That is why perhaps this guy knows this woman and her sinful nature, because they were the ones who were trying to bring all those people who were going astray into sin and other things back by force, not by loving them, by force, by giving them more difficulties in their synagogues, by writing their names, by deleting their names, and those kind of things. So Pharisees were acting like kind of moral police. They were waiting for the Messiah to come. The Messiah would be like, Messiah is Jesus. Pharisee Simon doesn't know it, but the Messiah would be the person who would collect all Israel, gather all Israel together, and then form a formidable force, cleanse the temple of all the evils that were going on there. And Pharisees believed that the temple doesn't yet have the presence of God, and there is a lot of hypocrisy happening. The priests who are in charge are colluding with the Roman government, and they were not happy with the system. And these Pharisees, they wanted to live upright lives that reflected God's image. They wanted to do that which is right and just for others. But they made a show of it. They did everything to show others. And inside, they were like those whitewashed tombs, as Jesus would describe in other places, that inside you are filled with dry bones, but outside you give an impression of being completely whitewashed. You are not really white. You are filled with all kinds of deadly things. You are dead inside. You don't have the life that comes from God, the life that the Torah was supposed to bring, the life of sincere love and compassion for other people who are suffering, loving God more than anything else, sincerely loving others. The sincerely aspect is absent in their worship. They are doing it just for the sake of it, just to show that they are better people than other people. And now here we have this Pharisee who is, of course, full of himself, and he believes that he is very righteous, and he's the person, he and his kind of people are the people who would be there in the age to come. So their expectation is that this Messiah would come, and he would gather them, and then he would go against the Roman Empire, he would overturn the Roman rulers, and then Israel would be free from exile, God's presence would return, and after that, some point, the resurrection of the dead would happen, and when the resurrection of the dead would happen, he would be there, and all the other people who have been living righteously like him, saying long prayers and having the longer robes than others and having long scrolls to carry. These long people would be there, is their expectation. Now, he's almost certain that he would be there in the age to come, and he's also certain that this woman, who is the sinner, who is washing Jesus' feet, would not be there. So now, in the Pharisee's mind, it is like the cut and right, black and white. He can see it very clearly, whether Jesus knows it or not, but he knows that this woman who has been sinning all day, all night with many different men and has been caught in such sins, and these moral policing Pharisees may have tried their best to bring her back, or may have tried their best to help her out of the church or out of their synagogue, whatever it be. They are well aware that this woman is certainly going to hell and certainly would not be there in the age to come, along with the resurrected people, along with Abraham, Isaac, and the other patriarchs. That would be a table fellowship like Jesus is enjoying right now with the Pharisee in his home. There would be a table fellowship in the age to come where Jesus, the Lord, and all these people, Abraham, Isaac, and all those patriarchs, would be reclining and eating together, enjoying and resting. And that scene this man can see, and this woman is nowhere there. She cannot make it. There is no possibility, even remote possibility. But Jesus here is kind of, he's turning it upside down. The whole narrative, he's turning it upside down with a story. So he brings in this small story called the parable. And every parable has a punchline. So he asks that's the last line, which of them will love him more? There's a punchline here. So who do you think would love this moneylender more? So he says immediately that the one who had the bigger debt forgiven. So Jesus' style is unique. He would make his opponent say the truth, so that they cannot deny it. Now, in the next sentence, Jesus is going to bring this matter in a different light. so that this person would be in for a surprise. So Jesus says to him, "You have judged correctly." Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon. So he is looking at the woman and he's saying to him, okay, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair." So Jesus is looking at all those small acts of righteousness that the Pharisees would actually pay attention to, because these are the things that they consider as the righteous acts, those ceremonial purity laws. If you keep them correctly, if you don't keep them correctly, then you are not waiting for the Messiah. You are not the right person. You will not be there in the resurrection gang. You are actually stopping the coming of the presence of God into the temple, the return of God, the coming of Messiah. So that is why they are moral policing these people. So those people who used to break those ceremonial laws, like Jesus' disciples would sometimes break the Sabbath, or without intending to do it, like they would eat some grain, and these people would feel offended that they are doing a harvest on Sabbath, which is not a harvest. They are just relieving their stomachs, and it is allowed according to the law, as Jesus quotes it. But still, they want to find fault with Jesus' disciples and say that these are the kind of people who are stopping the coming of the Messiah. These are the people who are stopping the return of the presence of God into the temple. So this is the excuse they give. These kind of people, these tax collectors who go and eat with the idol worshippers, they are like idol worshippers. They are idol worshippers because they eat with idol worshippers. They have broken the first two commands, and therefore they should be out of the synagogue. Their names are struck off. And then they say, we are striking their names off because these are the kind of people who are polluting our community, and these are the kind of people who are not allowing the presence of God to return into the temple. These are the kind of people because of whom the Messiah is being delayed. Even today we have in certain churches these kinds of people who would say that God is delaying his coming because of some sinners who are in the church. Otherwise Jesus would have already come. So it's the same kind of people during those times. These people are the Pharisees. They are ultra-religious, ultra-righteous in their own sight. They don't understand that what God demands is love, kindness, mercy, compassion. That is his nature. That is what these people should be showing to other people. But instead of doing love, which would in reality declare them righteous, they are doing hatred, and they think that they are more righteous than others. So here we see this Pharisee thinks that these are the kind of people, like, okay, the tax collectors and the sinners. What are these sinners? These are prostitutes and people who live immoral lives. When they live immoral lives, their names should be struck off from their books that they are keeping, a book of life that they are keeping in their synagogue, because unless they strike this off, Jesus' return would not take place. I mean, Jesus is not their Messiah. They don't believe him as the Messiah. But the Messiah, if he has to come, then the entire Israel has to be pure, is what they thought. That is why they call themselves Pharisees, set apart. We are the vigilance. We are waiting vigilantly, for the return of the Lord, and we are also vigilant about the purity of the community. So they would pay attention to these little details, like whether the ceremonial laws were followed correctly or not. So you would see often in the Bible that Jesus' disciples were criticized for not doing the ceremonial washing properly. So before the meal there would be a washing, and Jesus' disciples were just like, they would go with Jesus into the tax collector's home, and the tax collector's home is already a sinful house according to these people, and there they are eating food without washing their hands. It's not about hygiene. It is not about them getting sick. It is about they are not following the Jewish cultural tradition. And thus they are making the whole community impure. And because they are making the whole community impure, the coming of the Lord, and the coming of the Messiah, the coming of the presence of the Lord into the temple, and their deliverance from exile is being delayed. These are the people, these are the bad people who are stopping the coming of God into a community. So look at the seriousness of the crime. It's just, they didn't wash their hands. That's all what it is. But in the sight of the Pharisees, it is too much. So Jesus is actually taking their own criteria and he is using it to declare this woman who they call as sinful as righteous. Well, Mr. Pharisee, I came to your house. You were supposed to give me water to wash my feet and hands. You were supposed to kiss my head. You were supposed to anoint my head with oil. I'm your special dignified guest. I'm a rabbi. You didn't do any of these things. You didn't do it, man. You didn't do it. Which means Jesus is first finding the shortcomings of this Pharisee who is judging this woman. The Pharisee, he thinks that he would be there in the age to come. This woman would not be there in the age to come. And he believes he has some right given by God to play God in this woman's life and to declare her unrighteous. And that is what he's doing in his mind. And Jesus can read his mind. And Jesus says to him, well, are you keeping the Torah the way you demand others to keep it? I don't demand my disciples to wash their feet before eating food. I don't say that you cannot eat a little grain on a Sabbath day if you feel hungry. I don't demand people to do these kind of things which are just stretching the law a little bit more to make it uncomfortable to others. I don't do that. But you do these things. You are telling people that you shouldn't be eating with idol worshippers. If you eat with idol worshippers, you are an idol worshipper. You are telling people that you shouldn't overlook the ceremonial washings and you shouldn't deliberately break the Sabbath. So these are your criteria. I am using your criteria. And this tone is there throughout all the Gospels. If you read them correctly, and I have done a paper on this called Jesus' Hyperboles in Matthew 5, 6, 7, the Sermon on the Mount, where I describe that Jesus was not commanding people to obey everything that he said literally. Rather, he was critiquing the Pharisees, the measure that they were using against other people. Because the Pharisees would extend one side of the law. They would say that, with God you are not sincere because you are eating with idol worshippers. Therefore you have broken the first two commands. You have become an idol worshipper and you are not giving glory to God only, and you are taking God's name in vain.